All right, so we're gonna get into our first review of the day, and that is going to be for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Scott Pilgrim is the anime that is on Netflix. Is the adaptation of the comic Scott Pilgrim, very famous comic that came out, had its own movie adaptation, which well that flopped like crazy, but it became a cult hit and remained in people's hearts forever since then. And that's how I kind of got exposed to Scott Pilgrim was through the movie. Did you already were you already a fan of the comic before you saw the movie?
No, I've actually never sat and read the whole comic myself, just in little chunks and pieces. So it's still something I plan on getting around to.
Yeah. And the movie, I think it's almost I'd say it's perfect. It's hard to have any flaw with this movie. When I saw it, I was like, man, this is really good. I think it captures it's like this, do you think it kind of gets lost in the translation of like comic book movies when people say like what is the best comic book movie ever made? Do you think people kind of overlook this a little bit?
Oh, 100%. This is easily in like the top five best comic book adaptations, I think.
Yeah. Just how they were able to kind of adapt that style of the comic into live action and, do it so well. And then Edgar Wright, who, I don't think Edgar Wright doesn't really have a bad movie in his filmography, really.
Not
You
that I
know,
can think of.
there's some I like a little bit lesser, but I think, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, I mean, and then it's just like he was really at his peak here. I mean, just back to back to back. I mean, he had a great run. And what they were kind of able to do with the creativeness, the inventiveness here, the cast of characters also is just very well remembered for where you had when you look at the cast here, all of them went on to be really successful. You know what I mean? Even continuously, like you have Michael Cera, you have Anna Kendrick, you had Brie Larson in this. You had Brandon Routh in this. You had Chris Evans in this. All of whom returned for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Um,
Except for the actors who played the twins that never talked.
at least the twins finally get their justice. They finally get to talk some there. Uh,
That's true.
so, if you don't know about the concept of Scott Pilgrim, so Scott Pilgrim is all about, the character of Scott Pilgrim who dreams about this girl. This dreams about Ramona, comes into his dreams, and then all of a sudden becomes obsessed. And then he sees her at a party and immediately says, like, I got to get with this girl. This girl is literally the girl of my dreams, literally. But there's a small little kind of hiccup there. It's like, well, if you're gonna date me, you also have to battle my 7 evil exes who have a whole league that is determined to beat the shit out of anybody who ever tries to hook up with me. Have you ever had a Ramona in your life there, Sage?
No, no, nothing like that.
Had a girl dye her hair, never had that. A little bit maybe bipolar.
Well, maybe a little bit of that. Never
uh,
never quite the boss battles though.
yeah. I mean, I think life would be a lot more fun if people just turned into coins when they died. I mean, I think so.
I'd have more money, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, the murder rate would probably go through the roof. I mean, murder would probably go through the skyrocket, but at least it'd be more fun. I think it
Yeah.
make for a more cute death. But yeah, I mean, that's how the concept here. So in this series, we are going to go into a little bit of spoilers here, just in case you haven't seen Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, just to warn you. But we're going to talk about before. We'll let you know the warning beforehand. We get into that, but in order to go a little bit more in depth and to get into some complaints that people have had about the series, we have to go into a little bit of a further spoiler discussion about that. But that's kind of the general setup here with the series, and you do have that, and you have really a great supporting cast as well in this show. Like we mentioned, Scott, who's the main character, but there's also his girlfriend Ramona. There's also his sister. There's also his sister's name is, I believe it's Julie, is it not?
Julie is Aubrey Plaza's character. That's
Ju-
the sister's coworker.
The sister's
Um,
co
yeah, well, what is the sister's name now? Yeah, Anna Kendrick is the sister, and then Aubrey Plaza is Julie.
Aubrey Plaza's Julie, and Anka is Stacy. Stacy's the name.
Stacy Pilgrim. There we
Stacy.
go.
You have Chris Evans, who's Lucas Lee. You have Kieran Culkin, who's Wallace Wells. Who Kieran Culkin is now on Succession. People love him on that show,
Mm,
Succession. You also have let's see here, Brie Larson, who's Envy Adams, who plays for the rival band. Well, not even really rival band because they're so much more successful then Scott and his crappy band, you have that who she's the lead singer of Clash at the Demon Heads, I believe is the name of the band
Yeah.
there. Allison Pill plays Kim Pine, who's the drummer of Scott's band, who the Scott's band's name is Sex Bomb. You also have Brandon Routh, who's Todd Ingram, who's a guitarist or bassist in the Damon Head band. Jason Schwartzman, who's the leader of the Evil Exes there. Gideon Graves. You also have Johnny Simmons, who plays young Neil, who makes a return here. So yeah, and also Mark Webber, Steven Stills, who's also a member of the band as well. And then Ellen Wong, who plays Knives Chow, who I guess now since this series has popped up again, you know what I mean, into media, there's that age gap discourse that's been brought back of like the fact that Scott is, in his guys in his early 20s dating a 17-year-old girl, a girl literally in high school. What's your opinion on that there?
Well, I think it's creepy, and I think it was always creepy. I think it was always supposed to be. I mean, I think the original, both the movie and the original comic, all of the other characters are like, "Dude, stop it, dude, that's weird." Like that's like half the dialogue in the opening chapter of the story, and so it's funny to me to see people complain that this show points it out a little more because I feel like the movie and the comic also pointed it out, and so I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm just not sure how that went over people's heads, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, like you say in the show, I mean, they kind of pointed out, and in the comic, they pointed out, and in the movie, you'll see they'll point it out of like, wait, you're dating a high schooler? Like she's in high school? Like high
I
school,
mean,
high school?
the second that he brings Ramona around, the drummer says, "Scott, you should break up with your fake high school girlfriend." Right? Like the second that he even starts talking about anything else, everyone is all over him to be like, "Dude, you really need to take care of this."
Yeah. So I mean, it's a huge, really supporting cast. And that's what a lot of people really loved about the Scott Pilgrim universe is had all these huge cast of characters, played by all these really good actors who are returning to voice these characters. I will say the animation of it really amazing. Really does a great job at capturing, I think, the comic there very well. Here, what did you think about kind of the animation here?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty much a perfect replication of the comic art style. I mean, I love the movie and I think it does such a great job at translating into live action. But if there's one thing the movie's missing, it's the memorable art style. So like it's really nice to have this kind of secondary adaptation so that you can get a feel for how that looks in motion. I think it's really well done. Science Saru is a great studio. I've seen a few different projects of theirs, and I've never been disappointed in their work.
Yeah. And there's some things that you can do in animation that you just can't do in live action. I just can't really translate
Yeah.
all that well. And I think that's one of the benefits of it being animated here. And you see kind of with this, I mean, yeah, it just seems like it just ripped off the page of the comic, which is really good. You'll see a lot of the also good fight sequences here that you're very familiar with in the comic. I don't think there's really a whole lot of them too much, which is maybe a little bit one of my complaints. What did you kind of think about that? Like, did you think there wasn't enough fight sequences here?
Honestly, while I was watching it, I was very engaged just with the way that the character dynamics were playing off of each other. That I got to the end and I was like, oh wow, yeah, there weren't that many fight sequences in here. But I guess it didn't really bother me. I felt like there was so much going on, and the animation was still dynamic and fast paced in other ways that kind of still made it visually pleasing for me. Yeah, it didn't really stick out, I guess, too much to me.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I could kinda see when somebody kinda pointed that out, like, because the fight scenes, when they do happen, they are really fun. They are really exciting. There's a fight sequence with Lucas Lee, where he fights a whole bunch of ninjas, like paparazzi ninjas, and that sequence is really fun. There's a really creative sequence where, Ramona fights one of her evil exes, and it's, Roxy, who's, played
Mm,
by, Mae Whitman, who they are fighting in a like a movie video store, and they're going to all the different movies and everything like that. Like that's really creative, and that was really a lot of fun. So I do understand like when they happen, they are a lot of fun, and people maybe want to see more of that. But I
no,
think
I could totally understand that, yeah.
but I think also a lot of with this series, it deals with a lot of emotional growth and character growth and, confronting oneself, which I think a lot of what the comic and the movie did as well. What do you think about that in the series and what the series had to say here?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's very much present in the comic. It's very much present in the movie. But I think this I guess do we even call it an adaptation? I suppose because it diverges pretty heavily fairly early on. But I do feel like it almost is a second opportunity to explore that character growth on a deeper level. And at times it almost feels like you said, there are people that were like upset that it was being pointed out that Scott was being a little creepy in the original story. It almost feels like its character growth specifically spelled out harder for people who maybe didn't quite get the point of the story the first time. It's like, all right, did this not quite land for everybody, or did this almost go over people's heads? Well, here's an even more kind of introspective look at past relationships and kind of how you can grow from them, or how you can stagnate from them as a person too. Like there's this really interesting, because in the original movie, you don't spend a ton of time with each of the villains, and I
Mm,
think that's here I feel like we really dive in and develop almost all of them. I feel like the twins again maybe are like the exception, but everybody else gets like I feel like really gets explored as like a how did they move on from those right relationship dynamics, and how do they actually grow from.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. The benefit of it being an 8 episode series, even though the episodes are about 24 minutes, so you can finish this in like a day. You know what I mean? You can finish
Oh
like
yeah,
in a few hours. You can finish this because each is all about just like 24 something minutes. Is that you're able to explore more of the exes, stuff that we only got hints of, like their backstories and what happened, of like what led to the breakup. Here, you're able to really fully dive into it and get into the reason why things kind of fell apart. And it's also people confronting, like when breakup happened. Like sometimes maybe it's both people's faults, maybe just something happened. And, like, you see, like, a little bit with the Lucas Lee character, him talking to Ramona is like, when you just, you helped me and, like, she taught him how to skate and, helped him out and gave him all this confidence, and then all of a sudden, it's just nothing, you just left me. It's like, damn, that kinda hurt my feelings, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and it's like you just see this dude sulking. It's like, that kinda really hurt, and the same thing with Roxy, where she was just kinda like, we dated for the bit and just all of a sudden you just ghosted and just nothing, and just treated me like I was nothing. So it kind of delves into those things and kind of gets into that emotional pain. And then it's also a little bit of Ramona confronting those things about maybe what she did in those relationships there, and like why, are they evil exes, so to speak. And then with the Scott of, we're going to get into it with Scott of him confronting, kind of himself, kind of like what he did in the movie where he faces off like a negative version of himself. Here it's also kind of present as well.
I'd also love to just point out, just again, for anyone who thought that he wasn't supposed to be a douchebag in the original, when he meets his negative like self and fights him in the movie, the whole takeaway at the end of that scene is him going like, "Oh yeah, he was like a super nice guy," which is implying that regular Scott isn't, right? Like, just a small thing where again, it's like there's all these little things pointing out how not a great person he is.
Yeah. Watching this animated series also kind of made me nostalgic for Scott Pilgrim again. You know what I mean? Going back to it, the music especially, like the opening sequence,
Oh yeah.
is really well done here. Like that music, what they do with rock music, and incorporate kind of the video game type stuff. And then the soundtrack of like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie, probably one of the best movie soundtracks I think ever. Probably,
Oh god, yeah, that's a fantastic.
yeah. Kind of like this anime rock kind of theme to it, which is really nice. I think it's really popular. Sometimes I'll skip the intros a little bit with Netflix stuff, because I'm like kind of just trying to get through it. I was like, okay, I kind of got to get through this. But no, I always kind of watch this. I thought it was really fun, really poppy, really a good beat to it. I was like, yeah, I would
I
definitely
did
have this.
too. It
Yeah,
helped that it was only so many episodes too.
yeah, you know what I mean. That also kind of helped too. So yeah, any kind of negatives for you with the show, really that much?
Um, Gosh, I was really trying to come up with some just so that I would have some criticism coming into this. But Honestly, I wanted it to be longer. Maybe is my biggest complaint is I was like sad. I was like, oh, that was so fun and enjoyable and deeper than I was expecting. That I was like, oh, I'm kind of sad that it's over already. I'm curious to see if they'll do any more because I feel like the way that it ends, it feels like it could be wrapped up, or maybe there could be another round to it. But yeah, yeah, I was super pleasantly surprised by this. I was kind of going in like thinking like, oh, this is just going to be like the same story again, just done in animation, and it'll be fun to see it done that way. But it was heartfelt and it had just a lot to it that I wasn't anticipating.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think it is heartfelt. I think it has a lot of good to say about relationships, especially when you're at that age, because a lot of these characters, 20 something, early 20s, still trying to figure things
Yeah.
out, figure relationships out, and it has a kind of a lot to say about that, and just so visually appealing to just even see the series, even if you don't like where the story goes. I mean, just to even just look at all the visual gags that are here going on, like the stuff with Brandon Routh as Todd Ingram because he's a vegan, and then he's got like a big bucket of chicken, and he's just kind of consuming there, eating Toronto food there. He goes to train. He's running on a treadmill, eating like lettuce and like all that spinach. Like
Lots
the
of great visual gags with him.
yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff there is just really good there. The voice work in it. Do you think? Because sometimes it's not always a good, where actors who mostly do just kind of live action stuff try to do voice acting. Usually, sometimes don't work out. Do you think it works pretty well here?
Yeah, I think it does. I think and it part of it maybe it helps that it's the same cast you've seen play the same characters, and in when they played them in live action, they also, pretty much everyone in that cast knew just how hard to ham it up and kind of play it like a cartoon. I mean, it's, the most, in a good way, cartoony live action movie I've probably ever seen. And so I think that helps that translation happen here with the actors.
Mm, yeah. It was a pleasure that they were able to get everyone back again to do this. That also is a really great thing. And I've never heard anyone complain about the casting of any of these people. I thought everybody thought it was pretty spot on and pretty they played their jobs really, really well here. So yeah, I thought they worked really well. So it was great seeing them again, back to voice these roles and play these roles again. And it's just not them just doing the same material over again. And we're gonna be getting into that a little bit more, which I also kinda liked a little bit, but I can understand maybe some of the frustration. Yeah, I mean, do you think that, maybe is it too early to say that this animated series for you is maybe on par with the movie and the comic or better than the comic or the movie or
Um, I would say on par, honestly. I mean, I think to me it feels like a sequel in a lot of ways. It like, yeah, like an extension, like rather than even an adaptation. Yeah, I feel like it's an extension of the themes, but explored in a different way. And yeah, we already have, the original work. We have one adaptation that I think at least most people seem to agree pretty much nailed it the first time. So almost, why not do something a little different? And I think that's kind of what it needed to be, honestly. And I wasn't necessarily going in thinking that, but in hindsight, I'm so happy that's what.
yeah. So what would be your final rating for it?
I'd give it a high. I'd give it like a high peak. I guess maybe the only thing that would hold it back at all is just I honestly just wish there was just a little more of it. I wish there was just I got to sit and take it in for a little longer.
Mm, yeah. Mm. Yeah, I would think I would go to peak territory. I mean, just all the stuff that it does, the humor of it, I think works really well. I think when it does the action stuff, it does the action stuff incredibly well there. It's a lot of fun to see. It's great having these actors come back and play these roles. And I think I don't know if it was you telling me or maybe it was Nick who said that if one person said no to this, then they were going to recast the whole thing.
Oh wow.
If that there. So that's how important a lot of these actors were to this, and I think they bring it back very well. And it's exciting to be back in the Scott Pilgrim universe again. Didn't know how much I missed it till it was, I guess, gone there. And and it also has a video game as well, which the video game is also very fun as well. If you want to see kind of more of a direct adaptation there, and I've seen you play the video game before
Yeah,
on
just
stream.
just recently we did a full playthrough on my channel. We got the VODs up on YouTube.
Yeah. So you also have that as well in case you wanted some more too. Scott Pilgrim kind of fun. Yeah, I we're gonna get into it. I understand a lot of frustrations people had with it. But I also appreciate this thing for, like I said, being more of kind of a continuation and being just another story within the Scott Pilgrim universe, which is something I didn't expect from it. Because I just kind of expected it's like, oh, you're just gonna adapt the story over again, which is fine. You know what I mean? It's cool to see the animated series there. But where it goes, it's like, oh, okay, that's nice. But I can understand that a little bit. We're gonna get into it. But for me, yeah, I would give it a peek, because man, it is a lot of fun. I think these 8 episodes, and they go by really fast. I think I'm gonna rewatch it probably again.
Oh,
Uh,
100% me too.
because I probably missed tons of stuff. You know what I mean? While you're just kind of just yeah, just kind of soaking it in. And there's tons of stuff you could probably go back to and go like, oh, that or something in the background maybe. And there's a fun little thing where they bring in even Edgar Wright back here into it, which was
Was
really
it
cool.
Edgar Wrong?
Edgar
Silent
Wrong.
Edgar.
Yeah. So that's kind of even cute and fun. So yeah, I would give it a peek as well. So we're gonna be getting into spoilers just in case anybody has not seen the show or don't know about like maybe the twist this is being called. We're gonna get into that, so fair warning there. So the big twist, the big spoiler is that in the first episode of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, it starts off as being a straight adaptation of the comic. You see Scott, you see that he dreams about Ramona, he meets Ramona, starts to date Ramona. He's taking no responsibility for dating a teenage girl. You see all that stuff, and then he plays at a concert. One of Ramona's evil exes comes and challenges him, and then that evil ex is Patel, Matthew Patel, who
Mhm.
comes there. That's the first evil ex that he fights. And then instead of winning that fight, it looks like that he actually gets killed in that fight, and he's the one that gets turned into coins. So from there on out, it's a completely kind of different story. And then it's Ramona kind of, she kind of looks back and goes like, wait, he wasn't killed. He was actually somebody kidnapped him, and it's her going on a mission to actually get Scott back and discover who was the person that did kidnap him. And it's her through that she's going to confronting all her evil exes, and not usually in a fighting them type of way, but just usually just talking it out. Just talking to them and confronting them about it. And that's what it kind of leads to there. Do you kind of see where people maybe had an issue with that, or
I mean, if if you were just so excited to have like a straight adaptation of the book, I suppose. I guess for me, it comes back to that thing where I think the movie just nailed that so well, being a straight adaptation, that I guess for me, it just felt like, do we need a second adaptation that's the exact same thing? Like, I get that it's animated, and that is different. Um, but I think I almost would have felt the opposite as the people who have that complaint. Whereas if it had just been a straight adaptation, that almost would have felt maybe a little disappointing to me. I could see where people are coming from if that's what you were wanting. But I think what they did is just so much more interesting.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I can see that, where people have an issue because the way the show was marketed, people point out, and well, the show was marketed as, a straight adaptation of Scott Pilgrim, of the comic. And I guess I kinda see that. I mean, that's what I thought it would be. I thought it would be just, "Oh, you're just gonna adapt it and you're gonna make it straight from the comic." And then, I mean, also, I guess you could also say not so much because it is titled Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, and that's literally what he does. He takes off.
Right,
He just
right. It kind of spells it out for you.
he leaves the story, so I guess you can kinda say it does what the title does, so it's like it's the title of it is not named after any of the other comics at all. That could have been maybe a hint that it's not just gonna be a straight adaptation of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I also think that, like, despite that difference, and then the fact that, I guess what he's in 3 of the 8 episodes. I think in those the when we do you fold him back in and you get back to kind of him as a character, I feel like it does some really great character growth with him in that part of the story too. So like it's I don't think he gets just completely, shortchanged and just kicked out of the story entirely. He's removed for a good chunk of it, and that makes way for well, like you talked about how great the supporting cast of this is, right? And it's such a great opportunity to explore that supporting cast more and to let the spotlight kind of shine on each of them for a little bit longer. And then when Scott does kind of come back into it and we get back to him and kind of that main element of the story, I think it does some great new material with him anyway. So I don't know. I guess it still gave me everything I would have wanted out of a Scott Pilgrim story.
Yeah. So it gets revealed later on that the person who actually was responsible for kidnapping Scott was Scott. It was a future version of himself. It was a 47-year-old Scott. I think, yeah, it was 47.
Is it That's a Will Forte is
Yeah,
his
Will
name.
Forte, who's there was voicing older Scott. How'd you like that voice casting for older Scott, Will Forte?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I recognized who it was right away, and maybe I see Will Forte more than anything, just because I recognize it. But I don't know. I thought it worked very well.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was kind of pretty cool. I actually, maybe thinking about it a little bit, it would have been cool maybe if they had Jason Bateman do like an Arrested Development kind of connection there.
I
You know.
could honestly, that would have been a great choice too.
Uh, but it's future Scott. So, he's the one that grabs him, brings him into the future, and tells him, and his whole mission is, I don't want you to hook up with Ramona because if you do, things are going to go terribly. We get married, we fall out. Now he's living the depressed 40 something life where, you know what I mean? He's just living at home still living with Wallace, just completely by himself. Uh, so that's kinda there, and like I said, during those episodes, he kinda confronts that, uh, there and still continues that self-improvement path of confronting. Because it's almost like the story that we know from Scott Pilgrim versus the World, that happened and that, they lived their life and they went on happily ever after, except it wasn't so happily, and things went bad, and it's that Scott from that timeline of that we saw from Scott Pilgrim versus the World basically comes back to the timeline in this one to change things, which is also more of a modern thing. Because how many times have we seen time travel, different timelines, things like that, kinda alternate stories kinda going on, which is very much present here. Um, how did you kinda like that with the whole kinda the main villain of the show isn't the evil exes, it's actually old Scott is the main villain there.
Which in a way is technically still an evil X,
Oh, yeah.
in a certain, if you look at it a certain way.
Yeah.
Um, I know I thought it worked. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I do think the like alternate realities and time travel. I am a little tired of some of those elements in general in pop culture. I do think they're overdone. But I also, I'm always going to leave room for if you execute it well, I'll still come back and enjoy it. And I do think that it's handled really well here, because it is, when you take the original story, you have this new version kind of explore what the fallout of Ramona's all of those seven relationships actually were, and then to kind of flip that lens to her and Scott's relationship, which in the original is just the end of the story, happily ever. Like there's no follow up to that. So to kind of explore it under the same lens of growth that they apply to all the other X's. I think that's actually really strong. I think again with the time travel stuff, it's as long as the point that you're using it to make is interesting, I don't mind it. It's just often in pop culture nowadays, people like to throw it in just because it's a trend. But I think it's applied in a really thoughtful way.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think, what it has to say about this older Scott and what it means to a younger Scott and them having conversations. And then, him being gone, the evil exes don't really have anyone to really be mad at to funnel like to channel their anger towards really. So now they can just kind of go like, okay, she can have conversations basically with Ramona and talk things out and kind of conflict resolution there of kind of talking about those past and those relationships, which I thought was pretty nice there. Did you think it was? I hate to use this term, but kind of like a bait and switch type thing, or where they kind of teased Scott, but then Ramona was the main character there.
I mean, yes, but I guess I also don't think that is a bad thing necessarily. Like I think sometimes a bait and switch is good, but if it's clever and it's well done, you make an interesting point with it. I don't necessarily yeah, I don't necessarily think that has to have a negative connotation to it. I know that people like to use it that way, but sometimes a bait and switch can be a pleasant surprise, and I think this fits that.
Yeah, and there was some fun stuff they did in this kind of alternate timeline type thing where because Patel beat Scott, he's got a lot of confidence and he goes to challenge Gideon to be the head of the evil X's and to run it. And he beats him, and then he takes his money, he takes everything, and he becomes super rich. Basically swap places, and Gideon becomes like a total loser. And I thought that was really nice. And then there's a funny kind of little thing here where they base a movie off of Scott Pilgrim. They're like actually in the show, like they bring in Edgar Wrong, who is doing Scott Pilgrim versus the World inside the series here, and you get Lucas
Mhm.
Lee to actually play Scott there. So I think that's kind of
Yeah,
fun.
I thought that all the levels of meta there. I think one of my favorite of the villain subplots where their lives changed, because of the that initial change is Todd just falling head over heels for Wallace and just breaking up with Brie Larson over this like tiny little movie set fling that they have, and then his just like losing his his energy or whatever to be vegan and to be this powerful, and the way he just kind of slumps. Brandon Routh to me, I think, just had such a good comedic timing for all.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of different, change and kind of dynamics in relationships. Like we see at the end of the series, like maybe Lucas Lee maybe has a thing for Kim Pine now, where he kind of loses his career as a movie actor and he just kind of works as a barista now. So
Yeah,
yeah, which was kind of fun there.
doing like a Chippendales barista routine.
Oh yeah, they did kind of look like it's basically. I mean, he was showing off there. Yeah, Chippendales type stuff, Magic Mike barista there. So yeah, I mean,
I'd
I
watch
think
that spinoff, honestly.
yeah, just him flexing, yeah, serving up people's coffee there.
Why
Uh,
not?
so yeah, I think there was a lot of good fun stuff they did. You can say exploring more of the side characters there, but I get people say, well, I just want to I want to see Scott. This is Scott Pilgrim show. It's called Scott Pilgrim. I want to see Scott Pilgrim. So I get that. It just didn't bother me that much. I was like, well, I still think there's a lot of other great stuff here, in terms of talking about relationships and self improvement and growth, here as well. And it's not like Scott is completely just done away in the story. I think he still also has some level of importance there as well. Um, yeah, yeah. So I mean, 2 peaks for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Anything else you wanted to say about the series before we
No, no, I think that pretty much covers everything. Yeah, big fan. That was awesome.
yeah.
I like I said, I wish it was longer. I wish there was more of it.
Yeah,
That's all.
well, maybe I mean at the end of this we see that maybe there's gonna be possibly a season 2, maybe.
I
Ho-
hope so. I
Hopefully.
really do.
We see Gideon and I think it's who is it? Aubrey
Oh,
Plaza's character.
Julie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where they're teaming up, to maybe break up Scott and Ramona there, maybe there, so, yeah, maybe there's
Yeah, I'm all for whatever they want to do after this experiment. I think turned out so well. Just throw it at me. Give me
yeah.
more.
I wonder if it's gonna be tough since all these actors are pretty busy. I wonder if it's ever gonna be tough trying to get them to do it. But voice
I mean,
acting
I'm amazed they got them together this time. So yeah,
I mean, but voice acting is kinda different, though. I mean, you can basically just do it in your house and then just sync
that's
it
true.
up, so it's kinda different there. So yeah. Yeah, Scott Pilgrim, Takes Off there. 2 peaks.